Right, decent. Into game 2, we're on Oxide. Nice to see a bit of map variety here. I'm getting a bit tired of Death Aura. Here we go. We're on Oxide. This is Matticus in the bottom left of the map. This is Seli in the top right. And you know, in the first game, I was pleased with the way that both players had macroed. And I was pretty pleased with the fact that they both had upgrades going. They both built reasonable unit comps, etc. What I would have liked to have seen was a little bit more aggression, a bit more harassment, a bit more trying to get up in your opponent's face. From Matticus, arguably didn't have the strongest unit comp. Was a bit odd, focused a bit heavily on zealots in the early game. And then switched into Immortals reasonably blindly. There was no scouting, was my big criticism from that, because there wasn't any scouting, and you know, ultimately he may not be used to Protoss yet, and so you know, I'll cut him some slack for that. But how do you know what to build if you haven't actually seen what your opponent is doing? So more scouting, please. And as a Protoss, bear in mind that Immortals, it's important to have some Immortals in your army, but they don't trade well with Marines. They trade very well with armored stuff. Against Marines, you need splash damage. Marines have a high DPS, but they're very light. They're light units, so splash damage works really well against them. Nothing in this gas yet, and that kind of feels like a mistake with the oversaturation in the main there. So, other side of the map, the Reaper is nice and early. And I like this. I think we've seen this in each one of Seli's games. He gets the Reaper across the map, possibly even just on a shift click round the back of the mineral line and through the base, just to get an early look at what's going on. And you know, even the shift click version where you don't really pay much attention to it, I'm not against. I think it's infinitely better than no scouting. At the very least, you can glance on the map and you can see what buildings your opponent's got, even if you didn't watch the Reaper do the business at the time. So second rack's coming down before any sort of tech lab. There is gas being mined here, and he has got some banked up, so he is in a position to build a tech lab. Look, this was a mistake, I'm sure. I'm sure Matticus thought that he had transferred those workers previously. So he's well behind, and as yet doesn't actually have enough gas for anything. Also, no side core yet, you know, which is a bit weird. So the gateway is up, temporarily supply blocked, and I don't actually see a pylon in production. So the side core comes down finally. The zealots are at the front door, but of course the Reaper is able to hop up at the back. So yeah, I don't know, the zealots might actually catch this Reaper on the way down. If he's not careful, they are gonna, yeah. And again, if Seli isn't looking, he is gonna lose the Reaper. And that is a little careless. You know, really, you don't want to be losing the Reaper, because you know, if it's still parked down here, you can send it back in and have another look around in a minute, and that's a useful and wonderful thing. Yeah, so 3.5 minutes in, both players expanding. Matticus with the earlier expand, so he's going to have, you know, we might not see a huge income advantage just yet. Although actually it is reasonably significant, but you know, over time as this gets saturated, he is going to get a significant advantage, because no saturation here, and actually Seli just now getting up to fully saturated in the main. Yeah, so Matticus is going to stretch out a bit of a lead on that income. What will determine success really is how well he spends that. So going into Stalkers, and Stalkers are good units. They are pretty good against Marines. I quite like this. Bunch of Marines are going to come across the map and see what they can get done. And you know, if there was only zealots here and you're paying attention and microing the Marines, they'll tread really well against zealots. It's straightforward micro to do when there's low numbers. The way you do it is the first Marine that the zealots come at, you just pull back one at a time. Unfortunately, he's kind of walked right into the middle of the zealots, so that was a bit nasty. Didn't actually get any kills for his trouble. Did some hull damage to this Stalker. But the way you need to do it is have a few Marines at the back, send one forward to taunt the Zealots. So the Zealots will come and chase that guy, and you run him toward the back. They'll turn their attention to another one. You grab it and you run it back, and then the next, and you grab it and run it back, and run them back and run them back. So the Zealots are always walking forwards, chasing the Marines that you're pulling back, and they're always walking forward into machine gun fire, I suppose. So the Zealots, you know, they will catch your Marines, obviously. They'll get a few swipes off, but it's all about the fact that for every swipe they do, they've taken several seconds worth of machine gun fire, and you just trade efficiently. Okay, so engineering bay is going to allow some upgrades. We've got combat shield researching. Siege tank in production has just finished. One siege tank already in position on the high ground here. So again, Seli setting up reasonably well defensively here. You would need a fairly determined push to come in here, although at present you could push into this as Protoss. If you had, for example, blink stalkers, you could come up here, blink past this, and one-shot the tank. And if you're over at this side, you're out of range from this one, so you'd have to be a bit clever. To be honest, though, you'd need a lot of blink stalkers, and you'd need to know what you were doing. On the other side of the map, we've got a reasonably defensive setup here as well with photon cannons. Now, photon cannons are, yeah, pretty reasonably good things. My preferred Protoss defensive structure, though, is actually shield batteries. You know, have just some units with shield batteries to keep those units alive, and that is very effective. Colossus we've got coming out this time, and that's a good thing, because against Marines, Colossus are absolutely boss. So really, Seli needs to know that this is happening and respond to it, because if you focus on Marines really heavily and that's kind of all you've got, the Colossus will just mop them up so badly, and I think we did see that in another game with someone. Zealot charge is done, and that's a great addition to have with the Colossus. The charge lots underneath the Colossus. Colossus are like really tall things, so Zealots can actually run underneath them. You see, like, the Colossus can walk over the top of other units and stuff, so they don't get in the way of your Zealots, which means that when you go into an engage, the charge Zealots will all run forward very, very quickly indeed, and get on top of the Marines. And the Marines can't get past those. You can't then stim the Marines and run them forward to try and focus on the Colossus. And with the enormous range of the Colossus from the back, and that splash damage they do, they can put a great deal of hurt onto the Marines. So it's the move out from Seli. He's got a fractionally bigger army supply, but I would imagine that it's the Protoss army that's got sort of packing the more punch, to be honest, with those. Although, is there only one Colossus actually? Did he get a second Colossus? No, there are two. With those two Colossus, I think it's the Protoss army that can mete out the most damage here. But if Seli's sensible, he could just siege up in this position. You know, once siege tanks are sieged up, it's really hard to push into. So if he sieges up here and gets the Marines in front of it, you know, it's pretty nasty for Matticus to try and move down here and come and defend his third. So if I'm Seli, I'm thinking I'm just going to snipe the third and go home. And it looks like he's going to get that pretty handily. The siege tank's not sieged up, so actually the charge slots are going to come in and do a lot of damage. You know, siege tanks do plenty of damage to these charge zealots while they're on the move. I don't know about sending this second batch of units in. I would have just pulled those back home. You've achieved a good thing here. You killed this, so you shouldn't have pushed your luck. Killing that was your win. And actually, you lost a whole bunch of stuff. That kind of second batch of stuff that came through just did nothing. It just got wrecked. Yeah, so not the crispest, not the neatest of engagements from Seli. Could have had those siege tanks sieged up in advance of the Protoss stuff coming out. And it just means that these zealots, as they're walking in, long before they've even got to your Marines, they've taken, you know, siege tank volleys to the face. A tank in siege mode has a tremendous range, but also does that splash damage. So yeah, a very good thing indeed. So now the tables are turned, and it's Seli that's got the substantially larger income here. Isn't mining gas from this location just yet, but probably doesn't need it. Is beginning to build up a bank, so I'd like to see a few more production structures come down. He's built these to additional factories, which is good, but I don't think he's got them hotkeyed yet. As we can see, there's a queue of tanks here. You know how I feel about queues. So these factories need to get the tech lab add-ons, and again, these starports, you need to get those busy, you need to get those producing. Yeah, this could turn nasty actually. This Protoss army, the charge lots are fast and they will get on top of this stuff pretty quickly. Widow mines are so good against charge lots, they're so good. But look how many Colossus there are. These Colossus just negate the Marines. There might as well be no Marines here. The Zealots, once they're on top of the siege tanks, will see them off very quickly indeed, and there's essentially nothing left for the turn. Look how much damage this siege tank does to these charge slots as they come through here. Now, you know, picture that damage done to these charge slots, and then a bunch of Marines shooting them to just add the sort of coup de grace. It's a different engagement. So had he not lost those units in the second part of the engagement on the other side of the map, had he kept those at home, he might have been able to engage that. Had he, in addition to that, been sieged up in advance, you know, if these siege tanks are actually sieged, if this widow mine is burrowed, then it's a different engage. But none of those things were the case, so it is very much GG.